if somebody is presenting with a lot of hair falling out, for instance, if you're a female, the first thing I would be thinking is, do you have any allergies in your home that could be making you sick? Is there an exposure to mold? Is there an exposure to dust? And do you have feathers in the pillows, in the comforter? Because those things degranulate into dust. And also, how old is your home?
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Lee Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this episode, I sit down with functional medicine practitioner Cyril Vasquez to discuss an important topic for many women, the connection between gut health and female hair loss. Together, we explore how imbalances in the gut microbiome can influence hair health and how addressing gut health may be a key factor in reversing hair loss naturally. If you're seeking insights on hair health or looking for a holistic approach to female hair loss, this episode is packed with information on finding solutions by starting from within. Stay tuned to learn how addressing the root cause of female hair loss can lead to healthier hair and overall wellness. Cyril Vasquez, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
It is absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really great to have you here. So, Saril, can you kick off the show by sharing a little bit about your educational and professional background, what motivated you to study functional medicine, and where did your interest in helping people with hair loss come from?
Well, I'd have to share a little bit about my personal story because I had hair loss and thinning, which started at the age of 24. And I was working in the medical field for about a decade at that point. And the doctors were my friends. I had built relationships with gastroenterologists and dermatologists. And I went to them in full confidence saying, hey, I bought you some cookies. Remember me? It's time to help me now. So I made a binder of labs that was probably about this thick. It was 2 or 3 inches thick. And I learned how to read labs to help them help me.
Wow.
But I was already very familiar with them because of the nature of my work. So when they told me that there was nothing that we can do, all we could do is slow down the hair loss and thinning, and there wasn't much available. And they gave me the medication. They gave me spironolactone, which gave me horrible side effects. It was horrid. Yeah. I realized that I was going to have to take matters into my own hands. So I went back to school. I studied functional medicine, and I spent in my trial and error trying to figure out how to reverse hair loss naturally and going to school about $75,000 in 2 years. But the difference this time was I wasn't just randomly throwing crap at the wall, trying to see what sticks because I just wanted relief. Instead, I was being very practical in my approach, very thoughtful with every attempt that I made. And whenever something did work temporarily or worked a little bit or didn't work, instead of being disappointed, it was data. It was something that was catapulting me to the next part of my journey that eventually got me to where I am now. And so my hair loss and thinning was part of the journey. What actually really got me started was my dad's prostate cancer. But the thing was I put him on some herbs to increase his health, and his PSA, which is the marker for inflammation in the prostate, it decreased almost by a whole point in less than a month. And I got super curious about herbs at that point. And so I started taking them myself, and they really helped with my hair. And that's what started me on the journey of going down that route when trying to help myself, especially when I saw that the traditional realm of medicine that I was already involved in didn't really have much of a solution for me. So now I have a practice where I help women reverse hair loss naturally using the right diet, using personalized supplements, and using lifestyle practices to help them manage the condition in a way where they don't express the symptom, right? So my goal is to help women understand that hair loss and thinning is rather similar to type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure, because if you make the adjustments that your body is needing to avoid expressing the condition, it's almost like you can stop yourself from having the disease state because you're managing it so well, it's not an issue. So that is the good news that I have to bring to people that are struggling with this. And some of what I teach, of course, can also apply to men, but I do typically work with women because I have a group coaching program, and it's just easier to be vulnerable when there's no men, when there are no men around.
Yeah. But I guess what we're talking about is not like male pattern balding. It's not that. It's hair loss. It's not, like with men with, quite often it's higher hydrotestosterone, so DHT, high levels, that often causes male pattern baldness. But we're not talking about that, are we? It's a different type of baldness. Yeah.
We are. Yeah, we are talking about DHT. We're talking about estrogen dominance. We're talking about the type of baldness that spreads. Hair loss is one part of the solution, and typically that's triggered by allergies or hormonal imbalances. But that thinning, that spreading, that thins, that causes the miniaturization, that's mostly scarring in nature, and that can also be addressed, and we can have some success with that as well, just using the right modalities, the right supplements, the right diet, and whatnot.
Yeah, I know when I used to commute into London to work, I'd quite often see a handful of women each day, actually. And, you look at their hair and you think, wow, what's going on? There's definitely something internally going on. And, I've never had someone approach me to help them with something like that. But I've always been thinking, I'd love to help someone like that, because I'm sure I could probably help someone. And quite often, again, I don't know if this is your experience, but when I've seen women with hair loss, quite often they look generally unhealthy as well. Like they're quite often overweight, and they might have, dark circles under their eyes and things like that as well. Is that kind of your experience?
Yes, actually, I had a picture that I wanted to show the audience of what I used to look like when I had hair loss and thinning when I was at my worst. And you could clearly see the dark circles under my eyes. I had thinning hair all over, and it wasn't just from hair falling out. It was from a pattern of thinness that started in the middle and then spread all over my head, and it just became very see-through all over. But there were a lot of issues that I was going through that I was unaware of. There was mold toxicity, there were heavy metals, estrogen dominance, candida overgrowth, H. pylori, a lot of different things that compromised my health, that are happening to people quite chronically, yet they're unaware of it because there are medical conditions that regular, or I should say traditional medicine doesn't recognize. There's no diagnosis code for estrogen dominance. There's no diagnosis code for candida overgrowth. They do have H. pylori as something that they treat with antibiotics, but some of the testing that they use is not always the most accurate. So that is something that gets in the way of them having the resources to actually effectively help someone with these conditions, whereas someone in functional medicine would know how to approach that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention H. pylori and antibiotics, because quite often the antibiotics don't work anyway with H. pylori. They used to do triple therapy, which is 3 different antibiotics, and now they do quadruple therapy because they're becoming less and less effective. I don't know about you, but I've found Matula tea works really well with people that have, too much H. pylori. Don't know if you've ever used Matula tea at all.
No, I haven't.
Right.
Yeah, I typically don't talk too much about supplements on podcasts, but this one I feel like you should definitely try. It's called Pylori X. That is a supplement that I use. You have? Yeah, I find that I get a lot of benefit, as well as helping clients increase their stomach acid, especially with the hydrochloric acid challenge.
Yeah.
That's super helpful as well. And of course, addressing the gut microbiome and supporting the immune system, just to make someone generally more healthy. All of that, I think, is very helpful in getting someone to a place where they don't have a reoccurrence of it. And sometimes it can also be their surroundings that contribute to it. There was a time where I was doing the hydrochloric acid challenge. Do you think your audience is familiar with what that is?
Some of them will be, some of them won't be, if you want to share what that is.
Absolutely, yeah. So the hydrochloric acid challenge is something that practitioners in functional medicine use to help increase the stomach acid of a human being. And so you would take one pill with a meal, and then the next meal you'll take 2, and the next meal you'll take 3, and you will keep doing that until you reach the saturation point where you feel a little bit of a burn when you take that pill count. For me, that number was 9. I had to take 9 pills with one meal to feel the slight burn. And it's not in your esophagus like you feel with acid reflux, but instead it's in the pit of your stomach. And if you continue eating or you drink more water, that will go away. But once you get to that count, then that means the number below is where you really want to be. So I kept taking 8 pills every time I ate until 8 gave me a burn. And then I took 7 and then 6 until I got to the point where I didn't have bloating every time that I ate. And even 1 or 2 pills would give me a little bit of a burn. And then I didn't need it anymore. And then I only would take it if I had some kind of bloating. And so after doing that, I'm living on with my life and I'm noticing I'm getting bloated every time I eat again. And I said, my goodness, like, what's going on here? Maybe I have a reoccurrence of H. pylori. Maybe I have to do a little bit more work. And so I started doing the hydrochloric acid challenge again. And I got stuck at 5 pills. I was just like, why can't I get past 5 pills? I don't quite understand what the difference is this time. My diet is very clean, because I do know that eating too much sugar and too many carbs can have a negative effect on how much stomach acid someone's producing. So just eating too much of that can in and of itself lower your stomach acid. So I wasn't eating too much of that. I was eating pretty clean, and I was stuck at 5 pills. At the time, I was still working full time in the medical field, and I was calling on gastroenterologists. And ironically, my offices start telling me, we are having a huge breakout of H. pylori. Everybody has H. pylori. Every time we do the prep test, people have H. pylori. And I'm like, well, that's quite interesting that a lot of offices in this immediate area are saying that. And I happen to live in that immediate area. I wasn't that far from it. And I did recall that the city of Lake Worth had mentioned that they had some kind of spill in the water, but everything was going to be okay. And it only affected, this little area and this, that, and the third. So next thing I know, I'm at the gym and I ran out of water. I was filtering my water from my sink. I was using a countertop water pitcher that I would test the water and I would see that the total dissolved sediments were low. So in my mind, I thought, oh, this water must be clean. It tastes good, whatever the case. And I have a whole water filter for my home as well, just through regular carbon and also a water softener, not reverse osmosis or anything of the sort, but still it was filtering the water. And then on top of that, I was also filtering that water through the countertop pitcher. And so I went to the gym and I ran out of my water. So I went to go get the gym's water. They have a fountain that has a filter in it. And when I drank that water, I got bloated. And I said, that's strange. Why am I getting bloated from water? So I started noticing that when I drank the water at my home, I also would get bloated. And I said, oh, I think it's the water. I think the water is getting me bloated and the water is making me sick. And so I switched to bottled water. And guess what? As I continued to do my hydrochloric acid challenge, I finally was able to break that 5 pill count that I was stuck at. And I made it back down to a point where I didn't need the pills anymore. And so sometimes it can be our water that's creating that constant reoccurrence to a bacteria that maybe could make us more susceptible, because it is thought that H. pylori is potentially a commensal bacteria, just like candida is, where we all have it to some degree. And if it's behaved and it's in a small amount, it's not going to do anything to us. But when our immune system is either busy with herpes or Epstein-Barr virus or COVID or whatever the case is, and we're just inundated with toxicants and just having a hard time being resilient overall because of everything our body's trying to filter, that's an opportunity where these bacteria that are commensal say, oh, you guys, she can't do anything anymore. Let's go crazy. Like the immune system's not going to hurt us. And so they take advantage and they overpopulate.
Interesting. So what would you say are some of the common misconceptions about natural hair regrowth? Julie, a 47-year-old who works in computer sales, came to see me complaining of lifelong irritable bowel syndrome, which included severe abdominal pain and bloating, loose and very frequent stools, along with hot flushes, menstrual brain fog, and low energy, which affected her work performance. After taking a comprehensive history, plus running some labs, I discovered that Julie had a parasite infection, which may have been causing the loose stools, a methane-producing bacterial overgrowth that was almost certainly causing the abdominal bloating and pain, a leaky gut, low levels of digestive enzymes, as well as eating too many high oxalate foods on her vegetarian diet. So Julie reduced the high oxalate foods from her diet, plus she took a broad-spectrum antimicrobial supplement to help with the parasites and the bacteria in her gut, probiotics to increase her good bacteria and help repair her gut lining. She also took prebiotics to help feed the commensal bacteria, digestive enzymes to improve her digestion, and herbs to help clear the toxic lipopolysaccharides from her system produced by the overgrowth of gram-negative bacteria. At the end of the program, Julie reported that her health had never been better. In her own words, the improvement is staggering. The abdominal pain and bloating was gone. Her stools were back to normal. Her energy was up. She no longer had brain fog or hot flashes, and her immune system had improved as she no longer suffered from frequent bugs and colds. If you're suffering like Julie was and you want to get to the root cause of your problem, you can arrange a consultation with me at bodycheck.co.uk. That's BODYCHEK. And if we're a good fit, I could help you achieve the same kind of results as Julie. Now, back to the podcast.
I love this question because what I always hear is, no, but you know what? It's just genetics. I have my mom that is almost bald. My dad has been bald since he's 40 years old. And I'm just going to be bald when I get older because genetics say so. And what I want to say is just because you have the gene for it doesn't mean that it has to express. As I was saying before, same thing with type 2 diabetes. My dad had type 2 diabetes, but as I'm managing his healthcare and I'm giving him herbs and I'm helping him with his diet, he is no longer expressing with typical diabetic symptoms because his glucose level is below 120 in a fasted state, which means he's typically not diabetic. So we manage that with lifestyle change. We can do the same with hair loss. And the way that that looks like is if somebody is presenting with a lot of hair falling out, for instance, if you're a female, the first thing I would be thinking is, do you have any allergies in your home that could be making you sick? Is there an exposure to mold? Is there an exposure to dust? And do you have feathers in the pillows, in the comforter? Because those things degranulate into dust. And also, how old is your home? Do you have a home that is under a construction code that favors saving energy versus your health? Because what they're doing as of late is they're creating homes that are more airtight, and it makes it so we're living in an airplane and dust is accumulating and there isn't, healthy airflow, and we're exhaling out carbon dioxide and it's not leaving the home. Or, we're cooking and we're not turning on the vent. And so our homes become more toxic. And so that is another problem, even on top of the allergies, right? So that is something that I would say is to be thought of, to be managed in someone who's trying to be healthy overall, but especially if you want to grow healthy hair. It's not just genetics. It's not just hormones. For people that are thinking, oh, I have DHT that's elevated. I had blood work that showed that I had that. When I looked at, it wasn't blood work, it was a saliva test. When I looked at the patterns of my hormones, it showed that I had elevated DHT. But I also had estrogen dominance because of how little I was producing progesterone in relationship to estrogen, even though my estrogen wasn't necessarily as high as I wanted it to be. And that's the thing. A lot of women have estrogen dominance, but they have low estrogen. And it's just possible because estrogen dominance is categorized by the relationship between estrogen and progesterone. And so in those two instances, we would say, could this be a genetic thing? Right? But if someone has, for instance, high DHT, new science is extrapolating that potentially the reason that's happening is because DHT is a form of testosterone that cannot be broken down into any other hormone. When we create hormones through the process of aromatization, our hormones can be broken down into different types of hormones. But if it's DHT, it won't be broken down into anything else. It's true testosterone. And so testosterone has the ability to be an inflammatory modulator. So could it be that someone is chronically inflamed and they're using excess DHT to help their body deal with that inflammation? And new science is even saying that it's not essentially the DHT that's causing the miniaturization. They're starting to extrapolate that it's more a correlation versus the cause, because they're noticing that prostaglandin D2, which comes onto the scene with DHT, is what is causing that constricting effect, which prostaglandins can do that. They can constrict or contract in an effort to help you heal. And so they're finding that that's actually what's causing the miniaturization to happen. But so that in that case, if we can create a body that is able to be in the parasympathetic state more often, releasing healing hormones more often, if we can create longer periods of fasting, if we can incorporate intentional massaging and strategic supplementation, strategic food choices, we can create an environment where the body can break down scar tissue. We're supposed to create scar tissue as part of the healing process. That's why when we get a cut, we get the scab, but the scab's supposed to fall and the skin's supposed to come back intact. When that doesn't happen, it's because, we're just having a body that's not as resilient, having a harder time regenerating itself. But it's because it's not in that healing nervous system state as often as it should be, or there are things that are compromising its ability to do that. So if we can reverse engineer a body that can regrow healthy hair, what we're doing is reverse engineering a body that is in a healing state more often and that has all of the different components that are necessary for detoxing and for healing.
So it sounds to me like, one of the main misconceptions is that people are just victims, right? It's just circumstance. There's nothing I can do. I've just got to put up with it, right? Whereas really what you're saying is, no, you can play a role in this. You can empower yourself and you can not only slow down your hair loss, but potentially you can regrow that hair.
And the best way I can explain that is with a story because when I looked like that in that picture that I showed you guys, I had just broken up with my ex-boyfriend that I thought I was going to marry. I broke up with him because he was cheating on me with a girl that was 10 years younger than me. So 8 months later, I ended up looking like that. And I said to myself, wait a second. So I leave this guy who cheats on me and then I go and age like this? There's no way that's going to be my story. So I got very aggressive about trying to find the answer. And in my quest, I went to a personal development event with this guy you may have heard of. His name is Tony Robbins. And he says during the speech, as he's trying to help people that are typically getting in their own way of a breakthrough, he asks them, why can't you figure this out? And the person typically says, I've tried everything. And I mentioned that because a lot of women feel this way.
Yeah.
They don't want to try anything because they're so hurt, they're so disappointed, and they're literally believing they've tried everything. But in that moment, when he said that, I said, he's right. I am lying to myself. There is absolutely no way that I've tried everything in every single combination at every single time in every single way. What about the things that haven't even been invented yet? It's not humanly possible. And that was the point where I decided to go and stop throwing money at the wall, but instead learn, right? Learning is the only way that you can stop yourself from being a victim. Questioning things, thinking critically, seek wisdom above everything, right? Even though it costs you everything that you have, seek wisdom. And so the reason why that's such good advice is because now you're able to be your own leader with your health instead of just relying on other people to fix the problems for you, because you can start making intelligent inferences about what you're experiencing and what it means for your health. Like, people should be able to know, oh, when I eat corn, I get inflamed. As a matter of fact, that's one of the 5 foods that I ask my clients not to eat. I ask them not to eat sugar, gluten, dairy, corn, or rice, because when we take people off of these foods, they tend to live with a lot less symptoms. And just people are so used to feeling sick so often that they normalize their symptoms. And they've been indoctrinated to think, well, if it's not showing up on the blood test and you don't have a critical diagnosis where it's literally too late, almost, right? Then then you're normal. And it's just get used to it. This is what it feels like to be old. And so they get used to feeling that way. But what I like to empower people with is the idea that that's not normal. And if you're having those symptoms, it means something, and you are in control of whether or not those symptoms express, whether you have the gene or not. So if you take on the victim mentality of I've tried everything, then there's nothing left for you. You're waiting for someone to save you. But if you start taking responsibility of I'm causing this, I'm doing something that's making this worse, now you get to be the hero of your own story.
Yeah.
You take the power back.
Yeah, it's really interesting listening to you say that, because I also help people with acne, right? And that's my story going back a long time. And I hear so often people say, and I've tried absolutely everything. And then when I look at what they've tried, they haven't tried anything that I would recommend, right? It's such a flip in paradigm to go from, again, it's going from a symptom driven solution to a root cause driven solution, right? And it's quite interesting that you mentioned spironolactone earlier, because I didn't know that that's given to women who start losing their hair, but I know of spironolactone because it's often given to women with acne, right? So that's really interesting that those two conditions kind of really mirror each other in many ways.
Yeah, because of the hormones, the hormonal component to it. That's why they would give that. But if you're a woman and you're on spironolactone, you can't even get pregnant. The label says there are category C risks of birth defects. And I don't know what your patients have been through that have been on that medication, but for me, my breath was so rancid, I could not do my job. People would not talk to me. It's like, do you want to date looking bald, or do you want to have stinky breath when you kiss people? So I knew if I wanted to have kids, like, that was definitely not a solution for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So what would you say are some of the non-negotiables to reversing hair loss naturally?
Oh, I have 5 of them. So I'm glad you asked that. So one of the things that I tell my clients as they're working through the program with me is that we are trying to get them to this place called Healthyville. And to get them there, what we need to do is create a vehicle that can sustain them for the ride. And to prepare that vehicle for the ride, we are addressing circulation, not just of blood, obviously, because hair needs blood to grow. What you need for hair to grow is very simple. You need blood that is rich in nutrients and oxygen arriving at the follicle. And you need a follicle that has nothing obstructing it, no calcifications, no scar tissue. And so if you have that, hair can grow. So blood circulation is important, but more important than that is lymphatic circulation. We want a body that is able to detoxify appropriately. And one way that people can tell if their lymphatic system is working appropriately is if they have pits or puffs. And I got that from another functional practitioner, Kelly. I forgot her last name, but I know her first name is Kelly, and she's famous for this, where she tells people to check their armpits and to see if they have this inundation here. And you can even tell in me, I probably have a little bit of work that I could do, but this should be as hollow as possible. And having that hollow is one indication that you have a lymphatic system that is working well. Another thing is if you have rings and your rings aren't feeling as loose as they were before, then your fingers might be swollen. So that's another thing. Or maybe you feel like your stomach feels just a little bit bigger, but it's not bloat, but it just feels a little swollen. That can be something else. There are several symptoms, but the thing is that if you're not having the detoxification process fluid within you, that's where you create an environment that is hospitable for parasites, for fungal overgrowth, for bacterial overgrowth, because you just become more acidic in nature and your body becomes one that can support that. So you want to get the trash out of your body almost as quickly as you get it in to create that parasympathetic state. So that's one. Another one is sleep. When we are sleeping at night, our cranial area is detoxifying through the glymphatic system. And the reason they call it the glymph with a G, glymphatic system, is because we have glial cells in our brains that shrink by 60%. So that kind of creates our brain to become smaller in the process so that what is around there can drain out. And it also helps if you're sleeping in a way where your head is a little inclined. So maybe a pillow that's high so it can drain easier. But on top of all of that, your liver is detoxing in the middle of the night as well. And the liver is what is responsible for balancing your hormones in part as well. So we want to make sure that your sleep is in sync with the circadian rhythm, that you're getting optimal sleep, because that's going to help with the healing process. We also want to help with gut healing and make sure that your gut is working well. And there's a range of different things that we're looking at with gut health, like the gut lining and how much stomach acid you have, the microbiota, if you have any low grade infections, are you having regular bowel movements? But all of that is helping because, the colon, it's where you get the nutrition. It's where you get rid of waste. It's such a lifeline to the body. There's also that gut-brain connection. And so if you're creating an environment that's hospitable for some kind of fungal overgrowth, and then this thing invades other organs in your body, it can find its way to your nails. It can find its way to your scalp. And so it all starts in the gut. That's why Hippocrates says all health starts in the gut. So we definitely want to make sure that we've done some gut healing work. Another thing that we want to address is inflammation. There's so many of us. We're walking around with low-grade inflammation and we just think it's normal. We have no idea. It could be from leaky gut. That's a condition where your gut is permeable and food that is supposed to be nutritious enters your blood way too soon, and then your body interprets it as a threat. So that is something that could be causing chronic inflammation as well as many other things. And lastly, it is, I feel like I always forgot one. So it's, blood sugar balance. That's the last one, because blood sugar is a precursor to your hormones. Cortisol is a hormone. Insulin is a hormone. And if you have elevated blood sugar or low dips and high, and high climaxes of blood sugar, then that's just not healthy. It's not stable. And so you're also creating an inflammatory environment, and you're also creating a scenario where your hormones are in disarray. So you definitely want to normalize the blood sugar response. When we are fasting, our blood sugar should be between 85 and 100. When you wake up, you haven't eaten for 8 hours. If you test your blood sugar, that's where you should be. If you're over that, then we're looking at prediabetes. If you're over 120, then you're diabetic. And then that's a real problem, because you're doing free radical damage to your cells, and you're literally aging yourself at that point. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to look like this when we're 75. So we got to make sure that we protect the blood sugar. So those are the 5 things.
Yeah, awesome. Again, it's really interesting. As you were speaking, the key things that I tell people if they want to overcome acne, number 1 is blood sugar balance. Inflammation is another key one. Gut healing is another key one. Stress is one, and you could put sleep in the same category as stress, because if you're not sleeping enough, you're going to be stressed. And then the other thing for me that's important is detoxification, but you need good circulation in order to detox, right? So there's quite a lot of similarities between the two on so many different levels. It's quite interesting because, as I said at the beginning or a little bit earlier on, I've never worked with someone that's come to see me because they've got hair loss. So I've never really, never really done a deep dive into it. But it's quite interesting that there's so many similarities between hair loss and acne. It's quite, I'd never even kind of thought that, but it's very, very similar.
And maybe throughout your tenure in your profession, maybe you've seen women that came to you with acne issues, but maybe their hair also improved as well from some of the work that you were doing, I'm sure.
May have done. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe less hair has fallen out and whatnot. And that's because when you create a body that is able to focus on something like growing hair instead of the mess that it's dealing with, then we can support the vanity metric, so to speak. But at the same time, I don't even want to call it a vanity metric, because it's more than that. And I think that's another misconception that we're dealing with when it comes to hair loss and thinning, or even acne. People think like, it's just skin, it's just hair. It's just a giant clue that something's going wrong. Something's wrong in your body. And if you keep ignoring it, the problem's going to be more serious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, that's the message I give people with acne. I say to them, you can treat the symptom if you want. You can take Accutane or birth control pills or spironolactone or all these other things that generally don't work very well. But let's say they do work and that clears your acne up. You've not dealt with the root cause of the problem. Right. Now, you might feel fine about that, but when you look at the potential side effects of some of these medications, so just take the oral contraceptive pill, right? Some of the side effects include breast cancer, cervical cancer, ovarian cancer, endometriosis. It's like, I don't know about you, I'd rather have acne than cancer, right?
I know, that's right.
So you're kicking the can down the road and not dealing with the issue, right? So whether it's your hair falling out or a skin condition, or you're in pain, or you've got no energy, your body's trying to tell you something. It's saying, look, wakey, there's something you need to address here, right? And, what you're suggesting is, let's find out what the root cause of the problem is and let's deal with it from day one. And then you haven't got to worry about anything 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the line. And, you can get to your 60s, 70s, 80s and still be very functional and still have a good quality of life.
Yes. It makes me a little sad sometimes when women come to me and by the time they get to me, they've already had the hysterectomy. They're already wearing wigs. They've already have taken out their gallbladder, taken out their tonsils, and they've done a lot of cutting things out and making changes. And even though I've still been able to successfully help them at that point, I know that because they waited so long to try a functional approach, they're going to have a certain level of handicap that they're going to have to deal with. And we all do to some degree. I mean, I had my tonsils taken out when I was 5 years old. So I know I'm going to have to support my body more aggressively with lymphatic drainage than other people for the rest of my life because I have a little bit of a handicap. But when you let it get to that point, like I said, it's not impossible. I still help people and they're very happy, but it's a lot more work and a lot more money because you're spending more money on supplements, more money on food. Like you need more things to help move the needle. It's absolutely still worth it because you only have one life. So you want to make sure that you get the most out of it. But what I think is that sometimes people, they don't take action until they're in dire circumstances. And the new token of wealth is health.
Yeah.
Because the world is becoming so much more toxic by every minute of every hour of every day that we're going to notice as time continues on. It's the people that are able to still be functional, still look healthy. Those are the people that are going to be the wealthiest because they're going to be able to function.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it takes a certain level of investment in your health, you know, to be able to carry out the vehicles, to be able to create the vehicle that carries out your other dreams.
Yeah.
So investing in your health is the best decision that you can make when you are figuring out where to invest your money.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I would add to that, what you've just said, just to summarize what you've just been saying there is, you know, if you're someone, your hair is thinning or your hair's falling out, the time to deal with it is now. Right. And when I say deal with it, I mean deal with the root cause, not try and treat the symptoms. Right. So, you know, if you're listening to this, watching this, and you're suffering from those symptoms, the time to contact Saril is today. Right. Get on her program and help not just get your hair back, but get your health back.
Yeah, and I'd love to offer something to your listeners if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got a while to go yet, but feel free.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I guess for those of you who don't make it to the end, I'll just say it now. But there is a quiz on my website that helps people understand what their potential is for natural hair regrowth. The vast majority of cases are able to see very obvious results, even if there is scarring alopecia or androgenetic alopecia. But take the quiz, and at the end, there's an opportunity to have a 30-minute symptom decoding session. So normally there's a cost to that, but if you use the discount code CONSULT, CONSULT, then that fee is waived. And then we can go over your symptoms tracker for 30 minutes. You can tell me a little bit about your hair loss, and I can give you an understanding of what is going on a deeper level. And so you just go to my website, belcanics.com. I'm sure we can put that in the show notes.
Sure. Yeah.
And the quiz will pop up, or you could just go to the top and click on quiz.
Awesome. That's great. So so someone comes to you, one of the things they need to do, they need to heal their gut. What would be some key advice in terms of things to eat to try and optimize gut health? Hey there, Rebels. I have got something very special to share with you today. Did you know that every month I release an exclusive No Punches Pulled episode? These are conversations you won't hear anywhere else with incredible, sometimes controversial guests who expose hidden truths, challenge corruption, and bring you to actionable steps to take charge of your health in a world where censorship and restrictions are on the rise. These subscriber-only episodes go deep, and for the price of a single takeaway coffee each month, you can become a paid subscriber to access this extra content, the kind of content certain authorities would rather you didn't hear. By subscribing, you're not just supporting the Radical Health Rebel podcast, you're helping bring even bolder, more controversial, and inspiring guests onto the show. You'll also be making an investment in real health, real truth, and real solutions, so much more meaningful than what you get with TV licenses, cable subscriptions, of film streaming giants. If you're ready to support this movement for health and truth, head to the show notes and click support the show. It takes just a moment, so why not give it a try right now? Then come back and enjoy the rest of this episode. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and for rebelling with us against the mainstream. Let's create a healthier, happier, and fairer world together. Go to the show notes, click support the show, and let's keep the radical health rebel movement growing strong.
Well, we talked about what not to eat.
Yeah.
And I find when people ask me that and I give them that list, they're like, Saril, you just took away everything that I eat.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to do with my life anymore. And it's interesting because I'm going through a challenge right now. I periodically host these for my community. So as a group for 21 days, we're not eating the foods that I mentioned before, sugar, gluten, dairy, corn, and rice. But we're focusing on what we can eat, which is something that should be focused on instead. And so foods that are great with balancing your hormones are cruciferous vegetables, sulfur-rich vegetables. So we're speaking about onions and shallots and cauliflower and broccoli sprouts. And if someone is feeling deprived because, oh my gosh, I love tacos and you took away corn. Well, guess what? They make tortillas out of almond flour. Did you know that? If somebody's like, man, I love eating sandwiches, but you took away gluten. Guess what? They make gluten-free bread out of buckwheat and gluten-free grains or out of nuts and seeds. Did you know that? Right? So we don't have to feel that deprived. They make pasta out of lentils. So typically the food categories that we're looking at when we want to eat a diet that does not have those foods is nuts and seeds. So like I said, we have tortillas and breads made out of that. We have milks made out of nuts and seeds. We're also looking at root vegetables. So we have rutabaga and sweet potato. The important thing is to, tomatoes, eggplant. But the important thing is to know your body by observing the symptoms as you eat anything. Because even if I'm mentioning something, you might know that when you have tomatoes, you get acid reflux. So maybe, or your joints hurt. So maybe for you, that's not okay. Right? So that the important thing is to definitely still be cognizant of what's causing these symptoms. It might be the food. It might also be your environment. But if we don't clean up the diet, we'll never know. So we want to focus on that. We want to focus on gluten-free grains. So like I said, buckwheat, quinoa, those are two of my favorites. We want to focus on, I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, and then lean meats. So protein that doesn't have a lot of fat in it because fat is a cesspool for toxicants. So grass-fed organic meat. And I wouldn't eat meat every day either because it is acidic. So, I would make that part of my diet, but not a huge staple. I would make it mostly a plant-based diet, but I would still have some protein that is wild-caught, lean meat, organic grass-fed thrown in there as well. But that's essentially what we're looking at. We're looking at nuts and seeds, root vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, sulfur vegetables, all the kind of vegetables. And we're looking at the gluten-free grains and we're looking at the lean proteins. So that doesn't feel that restrictive, does it?
Yeah. What about things like, this is, again, one of the things that's spoken about a lot with the kind of acne community is bone broth for gut health. What's your thoughts on bone broth?
I like it. Yeah. I'm okay with that. I think grass-fed bone broth can be a very healing modality, especially if you want to extend your fast. Let's say I'm having people shorten their eating window that they can't quite get as low as I want them to. They can break their fast with bone broth, and that kind of helps because it's something that they can introduce into their diet first thing in the morning that isn't negatively impacting their blood sugar, whereas most breakfasts do. And I've done bone broth fasts before as well. So I think that's good as long as you can sustain it and your blood sugar isn't going crazy from not having enough food that day. We have to be mindful of how is our body responding to this always, but definitely a good food to incorporate.
Yeah. Yeah. Just also be aware that, again, because this is something that I hear all the time. I've tried bone broth. It didn't work. It's like, it's not about working. It's just part of the puzzle, right? We know that it does help to heal the gut lining. That's why it's often recommended. So don't think, oh, I tried it, it didn't work. There's probably there could be many, many other factors that you need to incorporate at the same time for it to work, right?
Of course. And that's the thing that I think people are struggling with. They have been so disappointed trying to figure it out themselves. And they are so confused because one person says, you need to be eating whey protein every day between every workout, 20 minutes after you work out. And then someone else is like, nothing that is anything with dairy in your body ever is what you need to do or you will die, right? So who do you believe? Who's telling the truth? And that's why it's so important to, number one, partner with a functional practitioner, at least until you get into a cadence of what is working under the guidance of someone that knows how to put all these pieces together. But also to learn how to listen to your body and be able to use that as a guide as far as what's working and what isn't. When it comes to healing the gut, we know that bone broth has a positive effect on the gut lining, but nobody can tell that they have leaky gut. It's not like you walk around with a pain. Oh, there's a hole in my gut. Nobody knows unless it's an ulcer, right? So how do we know if someone has leaky gut? Well, typically they take a food allergy test. They've been allergic or responsive to everything they ate that day, or maybe they have a lot of food allergies. They have an autoimmune condition. I mean, that's typically how we would know, because in order to have an autoimmune condition, you need to have leaky gut, a gut microbiome that is off and not the way that it should be, and the genetics for that autoimmune condition. So people with autoimmune conditions typically have leaky gut. So that's the way that we are figuring this out, but it's not like someone is telling us typically, right? And so how is someone going to know if bone broth didn't work for them? You won't even know. The only way you're going to know is you are avoiding the foods that make it worse, right? That's important. You are also incorporating the leaky gut. Maybe you're also adding in the bone broth, but maybe you're also adding in other things, slippery elm, aloe water. Maybe the bone broth alone isn't enough. Maybe you have high blood pressure and you need to watch your sodium. There's all these different things that you wouldn't know to think of unless you worked with a practitioner that got you to the end line.
Yeah, for sure. So earlier on, you mentioned there's a questionnaire on your website. Is there any other way that someone might be able to work out if reversing their hair loss naturally is possible for them? Is there another way, or is that kind of the only way that you use?
Well, I mentioned the quiz, and that's just so that they have that opportunity to book symptom decoding session with me. But the onboarding process includes an 85 question intake form, which is very intricate. I'm asking everything from were you born vaginally or through a C-section, all the way to did you get the virus and that medicine that they were giving for it, right? So that is how I onboard my clients. I actually don't do a lot of testing. I really take a close look at their symptoms, and then I use that information to understand what were all the trigger points in her life that set her up for the fall, for that genetic expression.
I first met Amelia at a health club where I was hosting an event offering back screenings to the members. The first thing I noticed about Amelia was a dullness in her eyes, which I later realized was due to extreme pain, and I noticed that she was unable to turn her head and had to turn her whole body if she wanted to look in a different direction. Amelia informed me that she had a history of repeated shoulder and neck pain for the last 2 years and was diagnosed with spinal stenosis at C4-5, C5-6 and C6-7, and a stenosis is a blockage, which in Amelia's case was in the spinal canal of her neck, irritating her spinal cord. She had extreme tenderness over her neck and trapezius muscles on both sides, and she suffered from severe neck pain continuously. Amelia informed me that she'd been advised that spinal surgery was the only option, but the surgery came with great risks, including potential paralysis, and no guarantee of success, which made Amelia fearful of the surgery. In addition to this, Amelia suffered from continuous exhaustion, painful intestinal gas and bloating, even though she felt she was following a healthy diet. After a thorough evaluation, I designed Amelia a corrective exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle plan, plus I referred her to a NUCA chiropractor for specific adjustments to her neck. After following the plan religiously, Amelia is much stronger and much more flexible than she's ever been before, and no longer suffers from repeated neck pain and has full range of motion in her neck. Amelia also reported that her energy was maximized and that she no longer suffers from the gripping stomach pains that had dominated her life for a very long time. If you're suffering like Amelia was and you'd like to find out more about getting to the root cause of your pain, go to www.bodycheck.co.uk, that's bodychek.co.uk, to request your consultation.
For some clients, I saw it was when they moved into the moldy home, when they started the vegan diet and started eating a lot of sugar. As a matter of fact, that picture I showed you of myself, that was when I was eating a raw food diet that I got that bad.
Yeah.
I was just eating way too much sugar, and it created a lot of scar tissue for me. So that was one of my triggers, but there were a lot of other things. And for other clients, they had a death in the family. So there are different things. But then if we look back in the history, we have what set us up for it, right? There was the tonsils being taken out, the amalgams in the mouth. So I'm looking at all of this, and I'm creating a timeline of the timestamps that set her up to express the gene. And then we had the triggering event. For me, it was when I got off of birth control. Getting off of birth control is what made my hair stop falling out like crazy.
Yeah.
And so that triggering event is important. And then when we have all that information, then we can create a roadmap to Healthyville by looking at what are all the different symptoms that are attached to a system, the endocrine system, the nervous system, the digestive system. So we have a cluster of symptoms in every person that pertain to a system that is screaming, I need to be supported. And so that is the road to Healthyville, matching the symptoms to the system that needs to be supported. And that's how we reverse engineer the body that can regrow healthy hair. But knowing that history and identifying the triggers, all of that is important to create the puzzle that we're putting together.
Gotcha.
Hopefully that answers your question. But that's how people work with me, how they start working with me.
Yeah, that's great. So I've got one more question, or one more big question. Now, you've probably kind of answered it, but there might be something else you want to add to what I'm going to ask. What would you say are the true root causes of hair loss and thinning, and how can someone uncover them versus looking for a diagnosis?
Yes. So I did, when I was talking about the 5 non-negotiables for reversing hair loss naturally, I would say some of the usual suspects would be mold, toxicity, candida overgrowth, estrogen dominance, H. pylori, COVID, long haul COVID, an immune system that is very busy with Epstein-Barr virus or herpes. I would say just a history of overexposure to toxicants. I would say an inflammatory lifestyle. I would say.
Sorry, when you say inflammatory lifestyle, can you just share what some of those things might be?
Oh, wow! No, this recreative activities.
Yeah.
that are harmful to the liver and the kidneys.
Yeah.
That would be something, although that's not enough. That one thing, it's not enough. I can say, I'll give you this example. So one thing that I do with my clients in my program is I teach them what I call the damage protocol. And what it is it's a standard operating procedure for what to do that day that you're going to go out and drink, or you're going to go eat cake, or you're going to go on vacation. And when I did the damage protocol, I went on vacation for 5 days to the Dominican Republic, where my family's from. I went to an all-inclusive resort. And I didn't get drunk because I'm Christian, so I don't get drunk, but I did drink every day. Drinks were included. And I did have rice. I mean, I was in Dominican Republic and I'm Dominican, so I had rice every day. And it had corn and all of the things. And I applied my damage protocol, which it's like things you put on your head, you know, fasting periods, water, different supplements, things like that. Nothing too crazy. And so I was able to avoid recreating more damage as I was doing this. Or it was like I was creating less damage than I would have as I was participating in this lifestyle where I wasn't being aware of what I was eating or how much I was sleeping. And, you know, maybe there were cigarettes around me. I was drinking alcohol. All of these things, they have an effect, right? So I was being intentional of preparing my body for the blow so that I could not feel deprived and still live a life that made me happy, but give my body extra support when it needed it. So I wasn't making a lot of scar tissue that would thin out my hair and make it look like it disappeared. Because the picture I showed you showed thinning all over, but I also had bald spots right here in the center. There was a huge gap that was widening, and I had right here also a big spot. And so I was getting that pattern, and above my ears too, it was very thin. I was getting that pattern of thinning all over, which is from scarring. What the hair miniaturization process does. But an acidic lifestyle or an inflammatory lifestyle is a lifestyle where you're feeling all these symptoms, but you don't care. You're just living life and you're eating what you want and doing what you want. And your body's keeping you alive and just doing its best, but it's screaming at you like you're hurting. And so that's what an inflammatory lifestyle is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just thinking, I kind of stopped you mid-flow, didn't I? As you were answering that question.
Well, you see, so the reason I don't do a lot of labs in my practice is because, and it's so funny, Dr. Josh Axe, who's famous on YouTube, just came out with a commercial on the internet where he's saying that symptoms are a better marker for health than blood work, because some things we can't test for in blood work, but symptoms don't lie. Like they'll tell you if something's wrong or something's right, whether you think it's wrong or not. And so the reason I use symptoms as a better marker, and then I move to blood work if I'm not getting anywhere or I want to get even better results, is because I have the usual suspects that I'm going after, which I was mentioning to you. Like I'm looking for, what's the quality of the water that she's drinking? I had a client that she was telling me like, oh, I'm having a hard time getting results and I don't know why. And I said, okay, let's think about your situation. She was working at a light fixture place. She was working at a place where they sell the fixtures that hang on your ceiling. And the place barely got clean. There was dust all over the place. The AC was up on the ceiling. And when they took off the cover, they said they had changed it 2 months ago. It was covered in film, this thick of dust. There was just so much dust there. And then they had water for the employee that was in one of those devices where you take the 5-gallon jug and you pour it upside down. They were never cleaning the thing. There was bacteria in there. You could even see the bacteria on the bottom, where there's that holder that catches excess water. And so, her air quality is poor, her water quality is poor. She's in there 40 hours a week. So that was part of the problem. So that's one of the one of the things that I'm not even going to look at blood work if I'm dealing with that. It doesn't make any sense. So one of the root cause things that I'm looking at is like what's going in the body, what's the environment like, how many exposures does she have? Does she have amalgams in the mouth? Because that's heavy metals, that's leaching in her system chronically. And so it's just really a matter of looking at exposures and rate of detoxification. In functional medicine, we have this concept called the allostatic load. And so that is what I tell my clients, the invisible line that exists in all of us. And it's different for all of us, but the line represents the threshold that your body can withstand before it starts expressing symptoms. So, you get your tonsils, for me, for instance, right? This is my allostatic load. I got my tonsils taken out. I lived in an old building in New York where the pipes it would just like leach brown water sometimes. So we were doing that. What else was there? Amalgams in my mouth at one point. Then they were improperly removed, which caused more damage. Got on birth control. I had an eating disorder. That certainly didn't help. So, but I kept below until I took out the birth control patch. Once that happened, I'm now above my allostatic load. And this is the area where genes turn on. They turn on to help me survive. They give me side effects I don't like, but my body's not worried about what I like and what I don't like. It's just trying to keep me alive. So this is the area of genes compensating. This is the area where DHT elevates to modulate inflammation. This is the area where scar tissue is formed on the scalp to stop the spread of candida overgrowth. This is the area where people have elevated cholesterol because their body's creating more cholesterol to deal with little tears in their arteries. And they're using that to plug in the tears. And then when there's not enough good cholesterol to come and pick up what's left over, then they have that plaque buildup. And, now they have blood flow that is compromised. But that is a gift that your body's creating more cholesterol to help your artery that has a tear. But nobody sees it that way. They're like, oh, I gotta get all these pills, right? So that's the area where the genes turn on. So when I'm trying to work with my clients, I'm looking at how do I get them back here? How do I close this gap and get them back here? Because this is where we were when we were teenagers. When we were able to do whatever we wanted and eat whatever we wanted, we broke a night. We were up partying all night. Went to work the next day. Didn't miss a beat. We had less damage at that point. Yeah. And we were below our threshold of what our body was able to withstand. So I had a friend. I love telling stories, as you can see. I have a friend that was having symptoms, and he decided that he was going to adopt a paleo lifestyle to get rid of said symptoms. And he did so for 6 years. Then all of a sudden he says, you know what? I am so tired of not eating donuts. I'm going to live my life. So he begins to start eating donuts again. And guess what happens? Nothing. You know why? Because he abstained religiously to no fault, like very, very, very intently for 6 years, did not eat anything that he couldn't eat raw for 6 years. And then he undid so much of the damage that now he was more resilient, and he can occasionally eat the donut, occasionally eat gluten and not get a problem. But of course, if he starts eating that every day, he's going to be right back where he started.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So what's next? What's next for you, Saril?
Oh, what do you mean by that?
You can answer that however you want.
What's next for me? What's next for me is to create a world where we do not have a stigma around hair loss and thinning. I try to be as forthcoming as I can with all of my pictures where I had hair loss and thinning. I want to remove that shame, that stigma of shame that women feel around hair loss and thinning, where they're hiding it and they're ashamed of it, because they only feel that way when they have the narrative that it's only going to get worse. There's nothing I can do. I failed as a woman. Once they feel empowered, knowing that there is something they can do, it actually is in a way their fault, but now they get to fix it. They're not a victim. Then they get to create before and after pictures that they're proud of, and they don't have to feel ashamed anymore and feel so traumatized by it. Because I mean, with men, it's not a big deal. I mean, you know, men can have less hair on their head. Some women prefer men that have shaved heads. It's like a thing, you know.
Yeah.
But with women, it's just so traumatizing. You feel like you've lost your identity and your ability to be confident. I remember women bullying me, so to speak, because they knew I was subconscious about that. I remember one day I walked into a doctor's office and I had a treat to give away, but I wanted to give it away to the lady that I needed to talk to. It was like my way to get her attention. Like, it's like, oh, tell her to come on. I got a donut for her or whatever. And the girl that was wanting to go get her, she wanted something too. And I was just like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, my budget is low this month. And I had at the time a huge gap right here. Like, my hair was see-through right here. And I didn't hide it that day. And she started doing this, and she was staring at it and drawing a lot of attention to it to make me feel uncomfortable, to punish me because I wasn't doing what she wanted me to do. And I remember thinking to her, like, what you don't know is that I'm growing it back. So I would love to give women that opportunity to have that in their arsenal, and to not feel so ashamed and debilitated by the condition. That's where I'm going next, just spreading out that message of hope.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, women do tie in their sensuality to their hair, don't they? It's. I mean, look at me. I just don't care. I've been receding for about 13 years. I'm just not bothered at all. I've got a couple of nephews who actually got less hair than me, and certainly the older one, it definitely bothers him, and he's been talking about getting transplants and all sorts. And I always offer him my clippers, because then you just don't have to worry about it, right? Just get rid of it.
Yeah, and I recently had a conversation with a woman that is on a mission to empower other women to feel free to cut off their hair. She's African American, and she cut off all her hair, and then she just did the hyperpigmentation therapy. And she's like, it's so liberating. And I was just like, yeah, I respect that she's going down that route. I know firsthand that it's not easy to deal with hair sometimes. It's especially with my type of hair or African American hair, it almost can be a job trying to make it look good and doing all of these things. So I kind of get where she's coming from, and I applaud her for being brave in her own way, wanting to go down that route. But it looks good on her. It just doesn't look good on, I would say, most women. So that's the thing. Like, if it looks good on you and you feel comfortable with it, that's, so the more power to you, the one less thing to spend money on. But if you're a woman, like, for most of us, it doesn't look good. And there's just other things to take into consideration with estrogen-based cancers, right? If you have estrogen dominance and that's the reason why your hair is falling out, look into it, because maybe you're at risk for, estrogen-based cancer. So there's different things that are, and plus when people are working on that, especially, let's say with the acne thing too, maybe they're noticing that not just that one problem is resolved, but their libido comes back and they're able to lose weight, and, their mood is better. So there's a lot of benefits for exploring and investing in the health in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. In my acne book, there's a whole chapter on the side effects of the medications that are often used for acne. And at the end of the chapter, I say, for complete transparency, I have to admit, my clients have told me they get side effects from my program too. They include weight loss, more energy, sleep better, no food cravings, and there's a whole long list of other things that they've reported to me. That,
awesome.
And what, I have a saying that health and disease cannot live in the same body. Right? So if you optimize your health, I firmly believe if you optimize your health, you can't be diseased. You can't be unhealthy, right? You can't have health and unhealth at the same time, right?
Right.
And any symptom is just a sign that your body is out of balance in some way, and that you need to take part. You need to correct it, and only you can do that. No one can do it for you.
Putting it back in the person's hands is the best gift we can give anyone.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And where can people find you online? Just to remind the listeners again.
Yeah, well, actually, I have a Facebook group if they're interested in joining that. It's called Reversing Hair Loss Naturally. So I do go live in there once a week answering community questions, and I'm always posting in there and people are asking questions. And besides that, there is my website, of course. So there's a blog there, there's a quiz, there's opportunities to work with me, whether it's the symptoms decoding session that I was talking about, or the whole root cause resolution roadmap, whatever the case may be. Either one of those are a good way to start getting some more information and having a conversation with me. But yeah, I would feel honored to support your listeners' endeavors in seeking healthier lifestyles in whatever way that I can.
Awesome. Great. And yeah, I'll make sure that those links are in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Saril, thank you so much. It's been really enjoyable. I love the way you tell stories as well. It's not only just been educational, but it's been entertaining as well at the same time. So thanks very much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad you enjoyed them. It was such an honor to share the mic with you. Thank you for allowing me to pour into your audience. And I hope that if anything, at least the people that are listening to this can walk away with that understanding that, wow, there's hope. That would be the biggest blessing, to be able to have people understand that.
Yeah, I think that's a great message to end on, that there's hope. So that's all from Cyril and me for this week. But don't forget to join me, same time, same place, next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.